Hey guys, Lucky here, and today we're going to go over the solo Magicka Sorcerer. The solo Magicka Sorcerer is in a fantastic spot right now. Actually, it is the single highest parsing class in the game for single target fights, and that's really carrying over nicely into solo content, but we are managing to squeeze out just enough AoE damage to feel very comfortable there. So I put together a build that really performed very well in all of the most difficult solo content in the game. I was testing it out and it absolutely devastated all of it. And on the first try, it was one of those times where the build just really came together. So without any more delay, let's jump into the solo Magicka Sorcerer, how to put it together, how to play it so that you can play the Magicka Sorcerer and have it perform just as it is on screen behind me right now. So let's dive in. First up, for the race, you can go High Elf for the most DPS possible. You can also go Dark Elf. They're very good, well-rounded class, which allows you to go Stamina later if you ever want to be a Stam Sorc for a bit. But High Elf is going to be the most performant. Breton is also a fantastic choice, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of soloing. Breton has amazing sustain. They're always going to be a really nice choice for solo content. As for the Mundus, while we're soloing, we're going to use Lover Mundus, and this way we don't have to go find a source of major breach on the build, and it felt really good. We had enough penetration in solo content to feel very powerful without having to go and get caltrops in PvP. I know you guys hate going and getting caltrops, so I found a way to make the build work without it. And when you jump into group content, then go ahead and slot Thief Mundus. Like if you're gonna do a dungeon, it's fine, you don't need to change it. But if you ever start doing raids and stuff like that, you're gonna want to put on that Thief Mundus, take off the Ring of the Pale Order, or just look up my group sorcerer guide if you're curious how like a group setup kind of might look. But you can totally use this version of the sorcerer in group content. Just take off the Ring of the Pale Order and put on a 2-piece monster set. We'll talk about that when we get to gear. As for the attributes, we're going to use all 64 points in Magicka. The more Magicka you have, the more damage you do. So we want to really pump that up. As for the food, I'm going to recommend Ghastly Eyeball. Ghastly Eyeball is going to be perfect. It's going to give you 5,000 Magicka, and it's also going to give you 500 Magicka regen, thereabouts, right? Which means you have a ton more Magicka, which means you're doing more damage with every cast, and it's also taking you a lot longer to run out of Magicka. And actually, in the content that I was testing this in, I was not able to run out of my resources. This was a really well-balanced build. It really felt good this time around. And as for the potions, you can go ahead and use your cheap Essence of Magicka potions. They drop off of mobs, or you can buy them off of guild traders for like, I don't know, 8 to 10 gold a piece. They're very cheap. You can use those whenever you're doing easy content like normal dungeons, overland content, questing, whatever. And then if you're doing hard content, then you're going to go ahead and use the Essence of Spell Critical. We don't have to use Essence of Spell Power, which is very expensive, because Critical Surge is going to give us major brutality. So we can forego the Essence of Spell Power and instead take on the Essence of Spell Crit. Great for us. All right, for the gear, we're going to go ahead and give you 3 different loadouts. They'll all be on the website. And as always, I highly encourage you to use the websites to put the gear together. It shows you all the pieces of gear, where to wear them, what weights, where to find the gear. If you hover over the gear, it tells you where it drops, what dungeon, what trial, all of that kind of stuff. It tells you everything you need to know about the gear when you hover over it. Great website, so be sure to take advantage of the website. Linked in the description down below. I'll also link it in a pinned comment. Okay, so 3 loadouts. One is going to be for people that are willing to do trials. One is going to be for people that don't want to do trials. And one is going to be for people that don't have access to DLC content. I've got you covered. No matter what type of player you are, you're going to be able to do all the content in the game that you want to do. All of these builds are going to be very effective. Don't worry about not using the trial gear. That's totally unnecessary. It's overkill for almost all of the content, and it's not that much better than the non-trial gear version. So don't sweat it. For the first thing is the monster set. For the monster set, we're going to use 1-piece Slime Craw whenever we're wearing the Ring of the Pale Order. If you're not wearing Ring of the Pale Order or don't have access to the Ring of the Pale Order, then go ahead and use Ice Heart. This is a great solo set. It gives you a protective shield frequently to protect you from taking damage from enemies when, you know, you don't have Ring of the Pale Order. Ring of the Pale Order heals you a lot though, and so does one of our abilities, Critical Surge. So if you don't have Ring of the Pale Order, the Sorcerer is the way to go. This is the class to play. If you don't have access to the Ring of the Pale Order, or you don't want to farm it, you've got a built-in version of the Ring of the Pale Order in the Sorcerer anyway. We'll get to that when we get to the skills. So we're going to wear 1-piece Slime Craw when we're wearing Ring of the Pale Order. We're going to wear Ice Heart if we're not. And then for the body is the gear that's going to change based on what type of content you're willing to do, right? So if you're willing to do trials, then I highly recommend Oral of the Depths. This is an amazing proc set. It does a ton of damage whenever you light attack your enemy. It will occasionally proc and create this whirlwind of water underneath them. So make sure to stand the enemy in the whirlwind of water the tornado of water, the thing of water on the ground, right? Stand in that and make sure they're standing in it so that they take the damage from it over time. As for the jewelry and the weapons, we're going to use Pillar of Nirn. It works in a very similar fashion. It procs occasionally when you're attacking the enemies. Both of these sets have really good stats. Weapon damage lines, Minor Slayer, weapon damage again, right? And Pillar of Nirn has critical chance, weapon and spell damage, right? And then a massive proc. So great stats on both of these sets. If I didn't mention it earlier, Slime Crawl we're wearing because this is the highest source of crit chance that you can get from a one-piece set in the game. So when you're going to wear one piece on your head, this is the path to the most damage, is your Slime Crawl. Weapons, same thing. We're going to use 2 daggers, Pillar of Nirn. If you want to, you can also use a staff, Pillar of Nirn, instead of the daggers. That's totally fine. If you want to make this a staff build, that's okay. I'll put a note on the website on how to change it into a staff build. Basically, you're going to drop one of the dual wield abilities that we're wearing and pick up your staff spammable. And then for the back bar, we're going to wear the Maelstrom Inferno staff on all of the builds if you're able to get it. If not, well, then you just wear whatever you're wearing on the front bar on the back bar. Just double up. Maelstrom Inferno staff buffs our Wall of Elements. It's a really solid weapon, great for your back bar. It's also going to be proccing your weapon enchant, which is giving you more spell damage, right? There's so much going on with Wall of Elements and the Maelstrom Inferno staff, so definitely take advantage of that. And if you're not willing to do trials, or you don't want to do trials, I get it. Don't worry. Instead of wearing Herald of the Depths, go ahead and wear Auroran's Thunder. Auroran's Thunder is another set that does almost as much damage as Herald of the Depths, and it's farmed in a dungeon. It's got great stats on it, right? So we've parsed it out. It performs almost just as well as Herald of the Depths, you know, just a little bit worse. So if you don't want to do trials, it's perfect. And for the ring and the jewelry, we're going to leave Pillar of Nirn. That's a dungeon set, right? So you keep wearing that. As for the third and final loadout, if you don't have access to DLC content or you don't want to do DLC content, no worries. Go ahead and use Ice Heart for your monster set. Order's Wrath on the body. For the jewelry and weapons, Briarheart on the front and the back bar. And then if you're able to, go ahead and go to the Maelstrom Arena and replace your back bar Briarheart with the Maelstrom staff. Again, this is all written on the website. It's so much easier to follow these gear layouts on the website than it is here, because you can hover over the items, find out where they're dropping, and it tells you where they are slotted and what weight they are and what enchants and what traits you need to put on them all, right? Definitely take advantage of the website. We put a lot of work into that. All right, next up, let's go over the skills that we're going to be using on the Magicka Sorcerer. For the first ability on the Magicka Sorcerer, we're going to be using an ability called Daedric Prey. Daedric Prey is going to do a couple of really awesome things for us. One, it's an AoE explosion. You put it on the enemy, and then it's going to explode, and then it's going to explode again. And these explosions hurt both the enemy and everything around the enemy. So that's fantastic. Also, while this curse is active, our pets deal an additional 45% damage to that enemy. So we always want to make sure this is on. This is something that every time it falls off, we're going to replace it. It's got a 6-second duration, so you're going to be casting this fairly often, ideally, right? Because you want your pet to do 45% more damage. That's huge. And also, your ultimate is a pet. So make sure this is on your enemy when you use your ultimate, right? Because now your ultimate's doing 45% more damage. That's huge. Okay, so that's the first ability. Next, we're going to have Crystal Fragments as our spammable. Crystal Fragments is a channeled spammable, and if you hate that, if you're playing with Crystal Fragments and you're like, God, I just hate that this is channeled, it feels awful. If you can try it out and get used to it, it does more damage than any other spammable that you can use. Right, it is going to hit like a truck. You're rewarded for dealing with that channeled nature of this, or the cast time that the skill has attached to it, right? Go ahead and use it if you can, but if you absolutely hate it, that's okay. You could also slot something like the Sigil Guild's elemental weapon, where it's instant cast and you just light attack, use the ability light attack, right? And it's going to buff your light attack basically. And in my opinion, that one doesn't feel great. Crystal Fragments does take a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's really, really powerful. As you can see in the footage behind me, you know, we're melting bosses, melting enemies, and we are never even coming close to dying. All right, third ability on the front bar is going to be Barb Trap. Barb Trap, if you've watched my videos before, I've told you, you know, you really can't put a good build together without Barb Trap. You can put a build together, but it won't be good, right? So Barb Trap is amazing and essential for a few different reasons. One, it's one of the hardest hitting dots in the game, period. Two, it's giving you Minor Force, which is going to give you 10% more crit damage, which is huge, right? There's not a lot of ways to get that buff, and Barb Trap is one of them. And then three, it's a Fighter's Guild ability, which means every Fighter's Guild ability we wear gives us a 3% increase in damage, plus increase ult regen. Two very huge stats for a DPS. So we want to wear at least one Fighter's Guild ability for the ult regen, if nothing else. but hopefully 2. And we managed to squeeze in 2. Next, we've got Deadly Cloak. Deadly Cloak is a fantastic, right? It's a fantastic AoE dot. It's going to explode, hitting everything around you for the duration. And it's also great because it's reducing AoE damage to you by 20%. Dude, that's huge. 20% less damage taken is massive while also doing damage to your enemy. This is a great reason to run dual wield daggers on almost any build right now, since you end up in melee range in most fights anyway, right? Even if your first cast is at range, most likely they're just going to run to you and the rest of the fight's going to be melee, right? So being ranged in ESO isn't that big of a deal. It's not super helpful most times, especially while soloing. So when you're running daggers, you're getting the extra crit chance and you're getting to use Deadly Cloak, one of the best dots in the game. And the great thing about this dot is it sticks to you. So if the enemy moves or you move, the dot travels with you. You don't have to recast it, which is unfortunately a problem for a lot of the expensive dots in this game. Next, we've got Summon Volatile Familiar. This is our first summon that we're going to be using on this build. And you may have noticed this is going to be a 1-pet build. 2 pets takes up too many slots and you miss out on a lot of cool abilities, very useful abilities in solo content if you're running 2 pets. And I don't like it as much. And plus the Flappy Bird, the wings are always in the way. It's just not my favorite part of ESO. So I just left that one out this time. And dude, it felt great. Okay, so the cool thing about the familiar is 1, it can occasionally tank enemies for you, right? It'll aggro them and they'll attack it instead of you. That's always nice. 2, it does amazing damage. And when you proc it, it does AoE damage around itself. It explodes, kind of like your Deadly Cloak is doing for you, basically. So he's an AoE damage ability, essentially, as long as you're activating him while he's summoned. So always have him summoned, and then when you run into battle, reactivate him to get him exploding. Next, we have Flawless Dawnbreaker. Flawless Dawnbreaker is our front bar ultimate, and as is the case with almost every good build, right, we're not going to use this ability. This is here simply to buff our bar, right? You can have 2 ultimates slotted in ESO, but only one of them can be the best ultimate for you. And so what we do is we use the front bar ultimate to buff the front bar damage. This is where we're doing our spammable. This is where we're doing all of our damage. And so we equip as many bar buffers here as possible. So if we're not going to use one of our ultimates, we can use it to buff the damage this bar is doing. And so because it's a fighter skilled ability, it's going to give us 3% more damage, just like Barb Trap does, right? And it's also going to give us that increased ult regen. Now, the increased ult regen does not stack the more you have fighter skilled abilities, but the weapon and spell damage buff does stack. So we've got now 6% increased damage from these 2 abilities being here. Great buff. Okay, so again, you don't use this, but you can. Actually, it's a really good ultimate. And if you do use it, it gives you a burst window, right? Increasing your weapon and spell damage by 300 for 14 seconds. You'll see me use it in the footage behind me right now because sometimes the fight's going on and I know I'm not going to get my back bar ultimate because it's very expensive. So I want to end the fight faster. And so I use this ultimate because it's very cheap, 106 ultimate charge to cast it. So it's really good if you need the ultimate now, or if the fight's getting close to the end and you're not going to get the back bar ultimate in time. Next, we've got the back bar. So the first ability on the back bar is going to be Unstable Wall of Elements. This is a great ability for a couple of reasons. 1, it's a giant rectangle of fire damage in front of you. Burning enemies take 10% more damage from this ability, and they will be burning because you've got an enchant, a flame enchant and things like that that's going to cause burning. Like, you're going to cause burning. Things will be burning. This will be doing 10% more damage most of the time for you. Also, your Maelstrom Staff is buffing this giant rectangle of damage, right? So it's doing more damage because of your Maelstrom Staff. On top of that, you can recast this because it's the unstable version, which means if you recast it before it expires, it explodes. So you can cause it to just boom, 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 casting it every second, like a rectangle of massive AoE damage, right? You wouldn't want to do this on a boss, but if you've got like 5 trash mobs in front of you, it's actually a very viable thing to do, especially with overland mobs or normal difficulty mobs. They will melt to this ability, just spamming this ability over and over. Now, if you do this on a boss, it's not going to do that much damage, and it's probably going to drain your mana a little faster than you'd like. It's not terribly expensive, though, so just don't spam it on a boss, but if you're fighting like a few trash mobs, feel free. Next up, we've got Boundless Storm. Boundless Storm is a really fun ability because it's going to wrap you in lightning, dealing damage to the enemies around you. Every 2 seconds, it's going to be zapping something, which is going to be nice because when you're zapping things around you, you're also going to be proccing one of our other abilities we'll talk about in a moment. And the great thing about this ability, though, is that it's going to give you major resolve, increasing your resistances by 6,000. This one, yeah, this was so tanky, man. I was just, if you see in the footage, I'm face tanking bosses. There's only one boss where I played a little safe. I was backing away from him. the fire boss in Vodashon Hollows, like the final one, I was kind of walking away from him because the skeletons explode and they'll knock you on your back if they explode in an inopportune moment. But the rest of them, I just stood toe to toe and face tanked them, and it was fine. Activating this also grants you Major Expedition, increasing your move speed by 30% for 4 seconds. Great. So that's always nice. But the main thing that we love about this is that Major Resolve and the fact that it does pretty decent damage to all the enemies around you, but only the enemies close to you. But fortunately, you're melee-ish on this build, right? So you're always going to be close to the enemies. The third ability on the back bar is going to be Empowered Ward. This is your shield. It's going to give you a shield up to 50% of your health. So you've got your health, which is going to be somewhere around 20,000 HP. And then this basically pushes your health up to 30,000 effective HP when you use this, right? So it's a massive shield, and it's going to grant you minor intellect and minor endurance, giving you 15% increased recovery on magic and stamina. That's a nice little side effect. It's great. But the main thing is, this is something you can use, like if you feel like your character's health is bouncing around a little too much, just rotate an Empowered Ward into, you know, your rotation until things stabilize, until you get enough dots on your enemies for your Ring of the Pale Order to basically make you immune to dying. For the fourth ability on the back bar, we're going to be using Critical Surge. This is going to give you Major Brutality, which is fantastic. It's going to increase your damage by 20%, and it means you don't have to buy those expensive Essence of Spell Power potions to get Major Brutality. Great for us. But also, really huge about this ability is, while active, dealing critical damage heals you for 3,366 health. That's why I said this ability is kind of like the built-in Ring of the Pale Order for the Sorceress. If you don't have access to Ring of the Pale Order, the Sorcerer is the one to play, because they have this ability constantly healing them without having to use a DLC item to get that, right? Basically, the Ring of the Pale Order was introduced to the game to make it so that everybody else was as viable in solo content as the Sorcerer already was. Next, on the back bar, we have Summon Volatile Familiar. This has to be on the front and the back bar. You'll notice that it's on both bars, and that's because the Sorcerer pets have to be double barred. Otherwise, they disappear when you switch bars. So we have it on the front bar in the 5th slot, and we have it on the back bar in the 5th slot. And then finally, for the ultimate, we have Greater Storm Atronach. This is one of, if not the highest single target ultimate in the game. And combined with Daedric Prey, it's doing 45% more damage than it otherwise would. So again, make sure before you cast your Greater Storm Atronach that you cast your Daedric Prey, which enhances its damage to that target by 45%. And then also make sure you keep that up, right? Because this ultimate lasts 15 seconds, your Daedric Prey lasts 6 seconds. So you need to recast your Daedric Prey 3 times, essentially, to have full coverage, right? But the thing about Daedric Prey is, I think I forgot to mention this earlier, you need to let Daedric Prey expire. It's one of the abilities where you need to let it expire and fall all the way off and then recast. Never cast it with 1 second left, because then you're going to be ignoring like at least half of the damage it does, because it does 2 explosions. And if you recast it before the second explosion, you're losing half the damage that it does, right? You want to let that second explosion happen, and that happens at the very end of the ability, right before it falls off. So let Daedric Prey fall off every time you cast that ability. All right, that concludes the abilities. Let's jump into the passives. The passives might sound like something that's kind of boring to dive into, but this is really the difference between someone that's really good with their class and someone that's not, is understanding your passives, how they're working, what they're doing for your class, right? The passives are really what determine how we put a build together and how we play that build once it's put together. ESO is a game of passives. No one passive is going to make you a god, but the sum of the passives is going to be the thing that makes you really powerful. So let's start with the class passives. First up, we've got Unholy Knowledge. Reduces the health, magic, and stamina cost of your core combat abilities by 6%. Great. This is good for your sustain. We're just going to grab it. Next, we've got Blood Magic. When you hit an enemy with a directly applied dark magic ability, you heal for 2,051. Cool. We're using a dark magic ability as our spammable, so every time we use that, it heals us a little bit. That's great. Next, we have Persistence. After blocking an attack, your next health, magic, or stamina ability costs 15% less. This is really useful in solo content because you do tend to block attacks frequently, and part of the reason that this build had such good sustain. Next, we have Exploitation. When you cast a dark magic ability, you grant Minor Prophecy to you and your group. This is a reason why you're always going to have a sorcerer in a group, right? Every raid group is always going to have a sorcerer. You want this passive, right? And you're basically providing Minor Prophecy to the whole group all the time. Next, we have Daedric Summoning. For the first passive, we have Rebate. You restore 300 magic or stamina when one of your non-ultimate Daedric Summoning abilities ends. And we're using 3 of these abilities, so this feels really good. We're constantly getting some of those resources back. Next, we have Power Stone. Reduces the cost of your ultimate abilities by 15%. This means our ult is 15% cheaper for our class ult, but also non-class ultimates like Dawnbreaker, or turning into a werewolf, which is why my werewolf build is a sorcerer. It's because this cost reduction on your ult means you get back into werewolf sooner. Next, we have Daedric Protection. Increases your health and stamina recovery by 20% while you have a Daedric summoning ability slotted. Well, we always have one slotted, right? On the front bar, on the back bar, there's always one slotted, which means we always get that health recovery. The final passive is Expert Summoner. Increase your max health by 8% while you have a Daedric summon ability active, right? So we are always going to have our Volatile Familiar summoned, which means we're always going to get that 8% extra health. That's huge. That's nothing to sneeze at. Take advantage of it. Next, we have Capacitor in the Stormcalling line. Capacitor increases our magic recovery by 10%. That's huge, right? Because we are using a lot of Magicka. Next, we have Energize, increase our physical and shock damage by 5%. We have a couple of abilities doing shock damage, right? Our ultimate being one of them. That's a big one, right? So increase 5% damage. Also, we're doing physical damage with our melee attacks and stuff like that. Amplitude, increase your damage done against enemies by 1% for every 10% current health they have. The sorcerers tend to do really well at the beginning of fights because they have a reverse execute. And what I mean by that is they do more damage the more health the enemy has because of this passive, right? So they're doing 110% damage at the start of the fight, right? Because the enemy's at full health and they get 1% for every 10% health the enemy has. So pretty cool for the sorcerer to have this little buff early on in the fight. And then at the end of the fight, you're wearing something like Bloodthirsty, which is enhancing your damage when the enemy gets low health. Next, we have Expert Mage. Increase your weapon and spell damage by 2% for each sorcerer ability slotted. And on the front bar, we've got 6%. This is one of the reasons why we try to slot as many class abilities as we can onto this build, because we are getting a buff for each one. However, you'll notice you're only getting 2% from this per ability, right? Whereas Fighter's Guild is giving us 3%. So we did elect to take Fighter's Guild buffs as a bar buffer instead of Sorcerer. I think it would have been cool if they made this buff like 4% and Fighter's Guild 3. And then that way the Sorc was unique because you're encouraged to use your class abilities over top of the Fighter's Guild abilities that everybody in the game uses. But you know, I'm a fan of build diversity. Give us build diversity. But until then, you know, we're going to build it like this because this is the best way to build it. For the dual wield, we're going to take all the passives because we are using dual wield weapons. Why are we using dual wield weapons? This is the path to the most damage, and it's quite a substantial difference, right? It's a sizable difference. You can do the fire staff and it's going to be close, but then you lose Deadly Cloak, which is so useful. You lose the crit chance from the daggers, right? This passive right here is why we're using 2 daggers. Twin Blade and Blunt. Each dagger increases your crit chance by 812. That's huge, right? So that passive right there, you're going to grab all these passives. They're basically going to increase your damage and your efficiency with a weapon. For the back bar, we're using a Destruction Staff. So we're going to grab all of the Destro Staff passives. Same thing, having these unlocked increases your damage and your proficiency with these abilities so that you don't run out of resources as fast. Also, when you kill an enemy with a Destruction Staff ability, aka our Wall of Elements, you get 3,600 Magicka back. So if you see a big group of enemies, you can use your Wall of Elements to kill them a few times, and this will give you a ton of your Magicka back. So this is a good way to get a bunch of mag back. You see a few enemies, bop, bop, kill them all, and you get a ton of Magicka. Next, we have light armor passives. We're going to grab all of these. These passives are going to do things like make your magic abilities cost less. This mag reduction on abilities. It's going to make you have more penetration. This is why we're able to get away with not having a major breach on this build and doing really well. You know, we've got light armor, we've got Lover Mundus, right? We've got tons of penetration already without it. And so these are going to be great for that. And then we're going to grab the medium armor passives because we do have a piece of medium on the body, right? Because of our Pillar of Nirn, moving from the ring finger for the Pell Order over to our shoulder, right? So you've got a piece of medium on, at least one usually. And so grab all your medium armor passives. Same thing here. It's going to reduce the cost of your stamina abilities, of which we are using a few. And it's also going to increase your crit damage and things like that. Lots of damage, lots of sustain coming from your armor passives. Don't neglect them in ESO. Get them as soon as possible. Next, we have Fighter's Guild. We're going to grab the first 4 passives. The first one is Intimidating Presence. You get to skip dialogue with NPCs and basically bully them into letting you proceed with the quest. Next, we have Slayer, which increases our weapon and spell damage by 3% per ability slotted. 6% bonus there, as we talked about earlier. Then Banish the Wicked. You generate 3 ult whenever you kill an enemy, regardless of how many Fighter's Guild abilities slotted. It's always 3 ult. That's a lot of ult regen just for slotting, you know, Flawless Dawnbreaker over here. So we always do. And then Skilled Tracker, your Fighter's Guild abilities deal an additional 10% damage. We are using 2 Fighter's Guild abilities, right? And so they both get 10% more damage when we use them, thanks to this. If you do decide to use Sigic Order, make sure to grab your Sigic Order passives as well, because I said you could use Ellie Weapon instead of Crystal Fragments. So if you decide to do that, make sure to get your Sigic Guild passives, okay? Then under Undaunted, go ahead and grab both passives. These passives are going to increase your resource value, so you're going to have more health, mag, and stam. And also, when someone leaves a synergy on the ground and you grab it, you get resources back, all 3. It's great. Very important for your sustain and group content to have these passives. Next, under assault, we're going to grab continuous attack. We're only going to put 1 point into this because the second point doesn't do what we want it to do. And that's going to give us major gallop. So the first point gives us major gallop, meaning we move 30% faster all the time, anytime we are on our mount. That's the difference between your mount feeling like, man, I could run faster than this thing, and feeling like, holy crap, I'm flying now, right? Go to Cyrodiil, you do the zone story. To do the zone story, all you have to do is open up your map, click open zone guide, click start zone story, right? So go to Cyrodiil, L on your keyboard if you're on PC, right? Or click the symbol, join a campaign, doesn't matter which one, right? Then when you get there, open map, open zone guide, start zone story. And it's a PvE quest. There will be no PvP there. Do it all the way till its end. It takes maybe 5 minutes. It's going to ask you, do you want to skip the part about the ballista training? You need to do the ballista training. If you accidentally skip through it because you're spamming through the dialogue, that's okay. You're just going to have to do one battleground, just one. And that's going to unlock this passive for you. No big deal. Next, you have your racial passives. Go ahead and grab all of those. Racial passives are very powerful in ESO right now. So take them. And then finally, alchemy. Grab medicinal use level 3. Mine is level 1. I've been slacking on this character, which means this would have been even stronger if I had leveled this up. I didn't realize this character wasn't maxed out. So get your medicinal use to level 3. That's going to make it so that your potions last longer than their cooldown. Potion cooldown is 45 seconds. By default, potions last something like 35 seconds. So you've got about a 25% downtime, right, on this potion that's giving you extra crit chance, extra damage. And in this case of this build, it's giving you health back. Very important passive because you want 100% uptime on those massive buffs. So get your medicinal use to level 3 when you get the chance to do so. It's going to be very helpful for you. Okay, now let's talk about the rotation for this build. The rotation for the sorcerer is nice. It's pretty easy. You're going to make sure that you start by summoning your pet. It should be summoned before you enter battle. Don't start summoning it once you get into battle because it takes forever to summon. And then after he is summoned, you're going to cast your long like self buff. So you're going to cast your critical surge, your boundless storm, right? These are things that are buffing you. So you want those on before you start the battle. Then we're going to also cast our deadly cloak, right? So basically we got all of our self buffs, self thoughts ticking. Now we can run up to the enemies, beat them down, right? So next we're going to do is cast Daedric Prey. So it's going to start doing mega damage itself, but it's also going to buff the damage that your familiar is putting out and get your wall of elements down. And so essentially, to make this really simple, everything that I said is basically get your buffs on, then put your dots on the enemy, and then use your spammable whenever you can. Your spammable is crystal fragments. If you're using crystal fragments, it's elemental weapon. If you're using elemental weapon, and you're just going to keep all of these dots up, all the dots up, and then whenever they're all ticking, you're going to use crystal fragments. If one of them falls off, stop casting crystal fragments and replace the dot. Easy as pie. And then just use your ultimate whenever you have enough ult charge to do so. Probably save it for a thick boy because he lasts 15 seconds. So you don't want to use him on some trash mobs. Save him for a thick boy or a boss and drop him down and make sure that you get your Daedric Prey on the enemy. And next for the champion points, we're going to go ahead and send you to the website. I have a long list of champion points there and the order that you spec into them. It's so much easier to read than me just sitting here and reading them out to you and the number and the value for all, there's a ton of them. Spoiler. So check out the website and follow the champion point guide down at the bottom of the build there. And really take advantage of that build guide. We put a lot of work into them. Also, I stream on Twitch. Be sure to swing by my Twitch stream over at twitch.tv/luckyghost. You'll find me streaming ESO as well as like a host of other MMOs. I'm an MMO degenerate. I love these things. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video. And if you enjoy my content and you want to support me, make sure to click the link to become a YouTube member and you get perks like access to a private Discord channel for my YouTube members and my Twitch subscribers. And you guys can just ask me anything you want there. Take advantage of that if you want to, by clicking the link down in the description below to become a YouTube member. And I think that's everything for this build. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. Also check the website. The answer's probably there, but I'm happy to answer it either way. See you in the next video. Take care.